one can live without. Referred to in whispers, loves girls and boys making noise. And after dark in some respects, it's just a bundle of sound effects. Well, it's a wheeze, a sneeze, a pop, a cop, a crow, a chicken and a dove. And they can hand it out, give it up. None of us could live without love. Love is...
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Lainey Liu from the CTV's The Social and LaineyGossip. So what did you guys think? Is there a dry eye in the house? No, I bet not. What did you think, Lainey?
I loved the documentary. I've seen it twice, and I from the perspective of somebody who has a very complicated relationship with her own mother, I watched it through that lens. And then I'm a gossip columnist, so watching two people who were at the center of one of the biggest Hollywood scandals of all time, and a scandal that was perhaps the prototype of modern gossip, was fascinating to me.
Did you learn things that you hadn't known before?
I did. I learned a lot about, first of all, I didn't know that that's how close they lived next to each other. I would never live next door to my mother. And I don't think many of you would either. So that was a big one. But I think that I also appreciated seeing Debbie Reynolds, who is obviously a legend, how she behaved in real life or in real life documentary, which is that she was always in character. So Carrie showed up in that documentary in various stages of like disorganized appearance and also in mind. Debbie Reynolds in that film was always perfect. The coif, the makeup, the hair, the outfit, because she is of the old guard. That's how they trained her. And that training lasted for 80 years.
It's interesting. For me, I thought they were both on all the time. I think whenever the camera was there, in the film, I don't mean in life, but it's certainly in the, I think there's a couple moments when Debbie Reynolds, she admits in that one interview that it's not her best day, right. And we see her a couple of audio where we don't necessarily see her, where you get a bit of a glimpse. But I'm interested in your perspective because they both come from a Hollywood. I think both of them come from a Hollywood that does not exist anymore. It's not the same Hollywood that it was when Debbie Reynolds was one of the biggest stars in the world. Nor is it really the Hollywood that was around when Carrie Fisher was one of the biggest stars in the world. So how is that? How do you see that transformation in terms of someone who covers gossip and their centers people who have been gossiped about for so long, transferring to that new age, of the age we live in? How would it compare, the scandal of Eddie Fisher and Debbie Reynolds? Yeah. What would that look like today?
I'm not sure that it would look that different. What gossip is storytelling. And in storytelling, you have to have a narrative, villains and heroes. And so in that scandal in particular, obviously your villains were Eddie Fisher and Elizabeth Taylor, and Debbie was the hero. But I don't think it was accidental that Debbie was seen as the hero. Even though it's natural for us to feel bad for her, she totally played that part. So back then, they also had magazines like they have now, tabloids. One of the most famous magazines was Photoplay. I actually have an original copy of Photoplay, which I brought for you here. And this is one of my prized possessions. I never take it out of my house. So I want to but I really wanted to show you, it's still in its plastic wrapper. This is one of the most famous photographs taken of Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. So Elizabeth Taylor left Eddie Fisher to be with Richard Burton, and then they were photographed in Italy canoodling on a yacht. And this photo went worldwide. And you'll see the top headline of this magazine was Debbie Loses Baby, How and Why It Happened. So what I'm trying to say here is that even then, although you didn't know it, Debbie Reynolds was feeding the tabloids like Photoplay with her own narrative, like a Kardashian would. Sure. So she leaned in to the victim role. She leaned into the poor me, the rejected, abandoned mom role, and she rode that popularity and the groundswell of sympathy that brought to her for years and years. And to me, I'm not doubting that she was sad or that she felt betrayed. Of course she did. But also, she exploited it. She used it to her advantage. In the same way that modern celebrities take advantage of their own circumstances and their own created or manufactured or real narratives to put on reality shows or put out in magazines. It might look different now in terms of the way that information is delivered through social media and through however, but those inclinations are still the same. Does that make sense?
Totally. I guess I wonder about the ability to manufacture as successfully. Because in the age of photoplay, there weren't as many sources to story. The flow of information was much different at a much slower pace than it is now. You were far less likely as a celebrity to be caught on YouTube out of character. Yeah. So you were able to manufacture, and the studios were your allies in this in a way that they aren't as much these days, because they would have resources. Yeah. You know, when we talk about School of MGM, it was, you know, she was a contracted MGM player from the age of 16. You know, that came with things that doesn't now in that age. So I guess I'm just wondering the ability to maintain that, because we see celebrities now that have manufactured images. For sure. But we seem to be able to, the cracks can become perhaps more apparent easier now, or it's harder to hide them?
I think that what's different definitely is that studio system that at times protected these celebrities in the golden age also oppressed them. Sure. Celebrities certainly have a different relationship with the press, and yes, they can get caught out a lot quicker and easier these days, and yet I think that they have more freedom in terms of their career than they did before. And that freedom, I think, balances out what those scandals might be, or balances out how they might be affected by those scandals, because they're not boxed into the thing that the studio might want them to be. They can have an Instagram account and be like, oh, look how amazingly, refreshingly candid I can be. But that's smoke and mirrors too, in a way, you know? Like, I'm not sure that how much real versus fake is there. I don't know if that percentage has changed either.
Now, one of the interesting things I found fascinating about the movie is that they are a show business family. You know, and that seems like an obvious thing. But, you know, I was discussing with someone before the screening about how, you know, the son, Todd, mentions this idea of having to marry into show business and, you know, to have this sort of relationship. And because from the outside, if you're not in the business, this might look weird. Yeah. But I'm not sure if you're in, it looks all that weird. You know, because it is a community. You know, I was talking about community before. That's just a separate sort of community. And it was fascinating, that interplay and how much of how much show business was what they were about.
And I think that you see that even in, well, especially in Todd, how he became almost the unofficial curator of now both their legacies. So I don't know what would you say Todd's job title is? Like, what does Todd do?
Well, I think he's a hyphenate of many things. But in terms of the family legacy,
Yeah.
you know, I guess he is the keeper of that now.
Yeah. Like when we meet Todd, we show up at his house. I think it's in Vegas, right? In that dock. And then he takes us through the house and there's all the posters there. And then we find out that he helped her with the auction and whatnot. But we never get a sense of because he's not an actor.
He's a filmmaker.
Okay.
Yeah, he's a producer,
but he's not
director.
like out there in terms of having a real identity, a brand that we can attach to.
Well,
the brand is the family.
Yeah, he's not Princess Leia.
That's right. It's a family brand.
Yeah.
And to me, that is totally normal in Hollywood, but I would think it was totally weird in real life. To all be in that weird family business, and the business is to talk about our family shit.
Sure.
And it is.
Although I've met so many of those people whose that is their job. You know, who they are the keepers of a vast Hollywood legacy, and their job is to maintain that legacy. And it's, you know, it can be sometimes frustrating for curators like myself who want to do things that might go against that legacy. But it's interesting, you know, he's not alone. There's many that have that stewardship, you know, as we all are often for our own families.
But it's so weirdly open. It's like, hey, look at my wall. On my wall, these are things that normal people stash under the carpet or wherever. On this wall is the time my dad cheated on my mother and then went on to do this, and then my mother, you know, was this, and my sister was a drug addict, and all the things that she does when she was on drugs. It's so weird.
If my mother had been in Singing in the Rain and my sister in Star Wars, no matter what else they'd done, I'd still have those posters up on the wall. I have those posters up on my wall now, and I'm not at all related to these people. Just a big fan. In terms of their legacy as their career, you know, I think Carrie Fisher's is always going to be forever tied to, and rightfully so, to Star Wars. You know, a legacy she embraced sort of later in her career.
Her lap dances, as she
her
called
lap
them.
dances, as she refers to them in the movie. I wonder with Debbie Reynolds, one of the things I thought about this film is, you know, maybe I'm unusual as a Star Wars fan, but I watched Debbie Reynolds movies after, you know, my mother explained to me that Kathy from Singing in the Rain was Princess Leia's mom, and as an 8-year-old boy, it blew my mind. But, you know, I for sure then watched a lot of other Debbie Reynolds movies because that was Princess Leia's mom, so you got to watch all of her stuff. But it's interesting for the doc. I wonder how many. You know, Debbie Reynolds comes from an era of Hollywood that there's a less cultural connection for the current generation to that era. And I hope with the movie, people who maybe tuned in for Carrie Fisher will be reintroduced to the legend that her mother was, because what an incredible and storied career Debbie Reynolds have. I think Carrie Fisher, we're going to understand her legacy because they are going to continue to make Star Wars movies. Trust me on this one, folks. When we are all long dead, our great-grandchildren will still watch Star Wars, brand new ones. It's slightly different for Debbie Reynolds, although her work, of course, like Singing in the Rain, will absolutely be watched 100 years from now. But I'm just wondering, in terms of how the legacies of the career, how would you position them?
Well, I would hope that, as you said, that there will be renewed interest in Debbie Reynolds' career now that she's passed, and in particular because she's so connected with Carrie Fisher, and that people might be inclined to do as you did. I confess that I don't know much about Debbie Reynolds in terms of her film resume. I've seen Singing in the Rain maybe twice, like, you know, when it comes on TV on like a Sunday afternoon. But after her passing, I started reading excerpts from her memoir. And she talks about being a working woman in Hollywood during those decades. Over the last couple of years, in social commentary, in pop culture and political commentary, we've been talking about women and the rights of women equal rights, harassment in the workplace. And so while I was reading the excerpts from her memoir, it's called Unsinkable, for I think Unsinkable Molly Brown, she talks about all the things that she had to endure as a woman working in Hollywood during the 50s and the 60s. She had a director who slapped her in the face and who seemed to think that that was totally fine. Back then, women couldn't be like, I'm going to go to HR and report you. She had to creatively find a way to make it stop. So she started fainting every time that director would either yell at her or hit her or whatever. And when she fainted, it held up production. Holding up production costs money. And so eventually that director was like, oh, I guess I can't yell at Debbie Reynolds anymore. She told another story about how Bob Fosse kind of was a mega perv and would like walk up to her and stick his groin in her butt, and how she had to creatively find ways to stop the sexual harassment she experienced in the workplace. There are so many stories that for her, she tells them and she's like, well, this is just what we had to live with back in the day. And then you read them in 2017 and you're like, well, these are the kinds of conversations we have been having about women in the workplace. Hi, Casey Affleck. I don't know if you get that joke there. About women in the workplace and equal rights. And so on top of all of her wonderful performances, I hope that Debbie Reynolds might be, in a way, recast as a feminist icon. Even though she was America's sweetheart who pushed this image of perfect mom and all I care about are my two babies, behind the scenes, this is a woman who made lemonade out of lemons.
And also, that is part of the legacy her daughter carried on for her as well, because Carrie Fisher has spoke out about those issues for decades in the industry, both through her writing and her performances.
And now I can connect it. Yeah. And when I see Carrie Fisher saying, well, my mother's always been my inspiration, I can connect it. It just so happens that they executed their feminism in different ways.
And different eras, different in terms of how you take that action. For Debbie Reynolds to have a career at that era in Hollywood, she did what was required, and I think same with Carrie Fisher. Although it's you watch the movie, and you see Carrie Fisher, sneaking the cokes before the new Star Wars and all this stuff. It is still show business, and you still have all of that. Problems, as you mentioned, Casey Affleck. I mean, these are issues very present in today, not just stationed back in the 1950s with the Rat Pack.
Well, and I think you know a lot about Star Wars, probably more than I do. As you mentioned, you have the posters up on your wall, and one of the most iconic images of Carrie Fisher is in Return of the Jedi and the bikini, and so. Okay, so when it came out, that image was it was a turn on for a lot of people. And in her mind...
Yes.
Right. And she has spoken extensively about the fact that it's iconic, that image, and yet in her mind, she felt like a slave. She was literally a slave in that scene. And that she also felt... like she was exploited and manipulated into wearing that. And now in the end, the slave ends up strangling her oppressor. So there is some justice there. But I think that in her working out personally those demons, it's really interesting now to project that back onto the fan like you, and now reconciling how you thought of that scene and then how she thought about it. Do you know what I mean? It's to me, I loved it too. I was like, oh my God, I want to wear a bikini like that and look that good.
Well, I think it's still valid to love that scene. I get her experience, but I still think in the moment, that's one of the challenges when we reconcile these things. I would also say in the arc of the character for me, in the grander story, the last time we saw Carrie Fisher play Leia Organa, she was General Leia Organa. She was, my favorite part of that most recent movie was Princess Leia or General Organa in that film. I had very little time for virtually any other part of it, but I thought she was fantastic, and to me was, because it's interesting, even as a, she was my first crush for all sorts of reasons. I was the perfect age for those movies for that to happen. But the first image you see of her in those movies, if you're a fan like I was not the bikini. That's actually 3 movies into it. By the time she's already the leader of the rebellion. She's already a huge hero, well beyond, she's always the one that's got the plan. These other idiots are running around in stormtrooper costumes. They don't know what's going on. She's the one that is really the, hey, let's go down the trash chute. That's how we'll get it. Like, she's always been, so for me, when it came to the bikini scene, it was more like I had never thought of her in that way up to that moment. And because she was already General Organa in so many ... She was
more like ... and she's hot.
I guess. Because for me the character is not. That's just a sidebar to a much larger character, and for me that is a very powerful woman who's the leader of the major resistance to despotism, and I think a leader. When I think of taking my kids to see Star Wars, which we absolutely do, what was there? Has anyone not seen the new Star Wars? Oh shit!
It's been out for like a month though.
Like, spoiler alert about to happen. My daughter, Princess Leia is a big deal for them too. And I think that's, as a parent, it's great to have a character like that is from my childhood. Because the reality is there weren't nearly enough characters like that from my childhood for me now to point to for my daughter or for my kids. And for my son too, quite frankly, to see a powerful woman in charge of the rebellion. So yeah, I'm sort of, very gratified that that's how it worked out. I can't be, Star Wars has given so much, and while I have a great love-hate relationship with it in its current reality, those folks from the original movie, man, in a year where it felt like so much of my childhood left the earth, this one hurt the worst, I have to be honest, at the end of the year. Because I didn't, we haven't, Alec Guinness, who is Obi-Wan, he died years ago. So, like, we haven't lost a major, Star Wars figure in a while. And I didn't realize how impactful I would have felt it to lose someone who, yeah. I've watched Star Wars, I think the last count was 278 times in my life. I don't really keep count anymore, folks. It's sort of embarrassing. Like, I can recite the film from memory and all that, including the beeps and all that stuff. I'm not doing it. There's licensing, folks. I would get sued immediately. My Wookiee alone is copyrighted. So, and after David Bowie and Prince and all these people that, like, have, to me, feel so much about my identity, to me, this was, like, the moment when my entire identity was formed in that movie theater in University Theater in 1977. That's when my life as a movie geek, when that ship came across, was born. So I was surprised, because usually celebrity deaths, because like you, I cover a lot of celebrities and do all that sort of stuff, and you sort of get.
This year was like, or 2016
brutal.
Was brutal.
And this just felt like the straw, and my soul was the camel's back, and this one really hurt. And with her mother right after, wow. And so, but I have to say, I don't know about you folks, but the movie helped. The documentary, I think, in so many ways, way more than seeing the new Star Wars. This film it helped. I don't know. It felt I felt close, and yeah. So that's from the lament of one Star Wars fan about this.
That was very moving. Thank you for sharing that.
Now we should let you folks say something, or so raise your hands. We've got folks with microphones here, and they can come on over here. We got a waving wand over there. Yes, ma'am.
Just a comment and a question. After seeing the movie, which was very moving to me, I can understand why Debbie passed after hearing of her daughter's death. But secondly, I just wondered, had either one of them seen rushes or anything of the documentary before? I mean, you know, they obviously didn't know they were going to die, but did they have an opportunity to see the movie or comment on it?
Carrie was shown the film last year, and the filmmakers revealed this week that she needed to sit with the film for a while. It was very raw for her. The way they explain it, she didn't expect to reveal so much. And so in watching it back, anybody would be maybe uncomfortable, needing to take some time to process it. So the filmmaker said that she went away and watched it a couple of times and then came back a few weeks later with very small requests to make adjustments that were not big deals at all, and that HBO and the filmmakers were totally fine with it. So those adjustments were made, and so for sure Carrie saw it. My understanding was that at certain points, as you saw in the film, Debbie Reynolds was quite frail. So we're not really sure when and if she was able to screen it, but Carrie for sure screened it. And it also screened at the Cannes Film Festival, and Carrie was there with the filmmakers in May of 2016.
The film has been in production for, as you can tell from the footage and the timing of events, for quite a while, and was actually scheduled to be shown on HBO in March of this year, but they moved it up, I think, for obvious reasons, which I think was from a fan's point of view, I thank them very much for doing that.
So Billie Lourd, Carrie Fisher's daughter, if anyone doesn't know, the next generation of this legacy had a cameo in The Force Awakens. It's rumored that she'll have a much larger part in the next episode. What do you anticipate? What's your opinion on the future of the legacy and whether she will carry that on or really just kind of become her own thing?
Well, I mean, I
speak to the Star Wars.
my understanding is that she has an interest in performing, so I would guess there you go. In terms of like who will be the steward of the family legacy, I would guess Todd in the immediate, in terms of like the archivist of the family history. But do I think a Fisher will be acting on screen for? Yeah, I do. And do I think Star Wars producers are savvy people? Yes.
Billie Lourd's father, as you probably know, is Brian Lourd, who is probably one of the most powerful agents at CAA. She's doing TV now. I think she's doing Scream Queens. And Scream Queens is Ryan Murphy, no? So already Billie Lourd is establishing major connections. And I think that there's something pretty poetic about having another generation. I love that story. And I think if Billie is the granddaughter of Debbie Reynolds and the daughter of Carrie Fisher, I think that she leans into that and doesn't feel bad about it either.
I recognized the filmmaker Fisher Stevens as a former actor from the 80s and 90s, and I'm wondering how he became the filmmaker of this production.
I think Fisher would say he's still an actor in the 2000s. Just, yeah. Fisher's made films for years. I don't know. I would assume a relationship, because it's two directors. A relationship with Carrie would have. I don't know if you know more, but that would be my guess. He's made other documentaries for sure. This is not his first film for Fisher Stevens.
He was just at TIFF 2016 with Before the Flood,
Yes.
with Leonardo DiCaprio's environmental awareness documentary, right? He was just here. I remember. So I understand your question though, because I'm not gonna lie, like the only thing I remember about Fisher Stevens is that he dated Michelle Pfeiffer, and all of us were like, "What?" But I'm not sure what the relationship was. But in all the reading I've done, the other director is Alexis Bloom, and although Fisher Stevens has done so much of the press, my understanding is that Alexis Bloom was quite instrumental in developing the relationship. I read an interview where you remember in the movie where Debbie's sick and she can't shoot that day and she leaves a voice message. Hi Alexis, it's Debbie. That's Alexis Bloom, the filmmaker. So my understanding is that like Alexis Bloom had gotten to quite a comfort level with the subjects, and she's I think she's like a young up and coming filmmaker. So watch out for that name.
Got time for maybe one more?
There's somebody who's been
Right up
very
front.
patient. And hi, very sparkly. I love that.
I thought Debbie might like
I
it.
know. Yeah, exactly. It made me think of her outfit.
My mom passed away a week before Carrie. I found out Carrie had died the day of my mother's memorial, like when my brother came into the room. Totally lost it when Debbie died because my own family situation. Watching the documentary, their sense of humor, their family sense of humor is very similar to our family sense of humor. And I just want to thank you because it was cathartic and helpful.
Well, I'm so sorry for your loss, but thank you for sharing.
Do we have one more?
One more? Anyone? Quickly, yes, sir. Go ahead.
Oh.
In the Star Wars shirt. Good, we're getting it all in.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, seeing her here, like, as almost a real person as opposed to seeing her in character, it really helped humanize her, you know? And I just want to say that I look forward to following her one more time when episode 8 comes out. That's pretty much everything.
Yeah.
I'm really sad I never had a chance to meet her.
Me too. And although one final note, my big takeaway from the film, my other big one is, we should all have a friend as good as Griffin Dunn.
Oh my God! Right?
Really, that was
Yes.
the big. If we're left with one thing,
know.
it's that. Lainey, thank you so much for
Thank you.
joining us
Thank you
here.
for having us.
Folks, if you want, we're in the lounge. You can gather. The lounge is all secured off. Walk over there, have a drink, commemorate, celebrate Carrie and Debbie with us. Lainey might drop by. So have fun, folks. Thanks again for coming. Thanks, HBO.